I invited my family for a housewarming, but they did not bring wine. They brought crowbars and a sledgehammer. When I opened the door, the sound of shattering glass felt like my life cracking apart. My father smiled, claiming I would not dare kick out a pregnant woman. He wagered on my pity, unaware I had learned to play a new game called the law. My name is Everly Hayes, and I am 37 years old. The flight back to St. Paul had been a nightmare of turbulence and delayed connections, leaving me with a migraine that throbbed in perfect rhythm with the blinking seatbelt sign. By the time my Uber crunched over the packed snow of my driveway, it was past 11 at night. The Minnesota winter was in full throat, a biting wind that whipped the snow into frantic spirals against the dark Victorian siding of the house I had spent the last 4 years bleeding for. I tipped the driver $20, grabbed my suitcase, and stood there for a moment in the freezing dark. The house was supposed to be empty. It was supposed to be silent. It was my sanctuary, a structure I had purchased when it was little more than rotting wood and raccoons, and which I had painstakingly restored. Weekend by weekend, paycheck by paycheck. I had invited my family for a housewarming party scheduled for the following afternoon. I had wanted everything to be perfect. I had wanted to show them that I was stable, successful, and finally worthy of their respect. I walked up the porch steps, the wood groaning familiar greetings under my boots. I fished my keys from my purse, my breath pluming in the air like dragon smoke. I turned the key in the heavy oak door, the tumbler clicking with a satisfying weight. I pushed the door open, anticipating the smell of cedar and polished floorboards. Instead, I heard the sound of the world ending. It was a crash so loud, so violent, that I instinctively ducked, dropping my suitcase on the porch. It sounded like a bomb had gone off in the back of the house. For a split second, my mind raced through logical explanations: a gas main explosion, a fallen tree, a boiler failure. But then, I heard the laugh. It was a low, throaty chuckle that I would recognize anywhere. It was the sound of my father, Raymond Hartley. I stepped inside, leaving the front door wide open to the swirling snow. The heat of the house rushed out to meet the cold. But I felt frozen. I walked down the hallway, the Persian runner rug muffled under my boots, toward the back of the house, toward the conservatory. The conservatory was the heart of this home. It was the one indulgence I had allowed myself. A beautiful, light-filled space with vintage glass panes I had sourced from a salvage yard in Chicago, and driven back myself in a rented truck. It housed my fiddle leaf figs, my monsteras, and the lemon tree I had kept alive for 7 years. It was where I drank my coffee in the morning to prepare for the brutality of my job as a risk analyst. I rounded the corner and stopped dead. The double French doors leading to the conservatory were thrown open. Inside, standing amidst a wreckage that made my stomach turn, were my father, Raymond, and my younger brother, Brent. They were not drinking wine. They were not admiring the molding I had hand-sanded. Raymond was holding a sledgehammer. Brent was gripping a red crowbar. The room was decimated. The vintage glass panes, irreplaceable and fragile, were shattered, littering the floor like jagged diamonds. The custom shelving unit I had built to hold my propagation station was splintered in half. My lemon tree was on its side. The terracotta pot smashed. Dirt spilled across the new hexagonal tile I had laid just 3 months ago. Brent swung the crowbar, bringing it down hard on the frame of a window that looked out into the backyard. The wood splintered with a sickening crack, and the glass showered down onto the snow outside. "Harder, boy," Raymond said, his voice thick with exertion and glee. "Get that frame out. We need the wall clear." "Stop," I whispered. The word barely left my throat. I stepped fully into the light. "Stop," I screamed, the sound tearing at my raw throat. They both froze. Brent spun around, the crowbar still raised, his face a mask of sudden panic. He looked like a child caught with his hand in a jar. Except he was 32 years old and destroying my property. Raymond turned slowly. He lowered the sledgehammer, resting the heavy iron head on the floor amidst the debris of my life. He did not look guilty. He did not look afraid. He looked annoyed. "Everly," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "You are back early." "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling not with fear, but with a rage so hot it felt like lava in my veins. "What are you doing to my house?" Raymond smirked. It was that familiar, condescending twist of his lips that had made me feel small for my entire life. "We are doing you a favor. Evie, this glass room. It is a heat sink, terrible for insulation. We are opening it up, gonna extend the back wall. Sienna needs a nursery on the ground floor. She cannot be climbing stairs. I stared at him. The absurdity of his words took a moment to process. Sienna was Brent's wife. This is my house, I said, spacing out the words. Mine, not Brent's, not yours, mine. Raymond laughed again, a dismissive bark. He looked at Brent and winked. Hear that? She thinks a deed makes her the boss. Listen, Evie, family helps family. We are making space for the baby. You have plenty of room. Don't be selfish. He lifted the sledgehammer again. Now go make us some coffee. We have a lot of demo left to do before the contractor gets here tomorrow. Get out, I said. Get out right now. Raymond's eyes narrowed. The playful mask slipped, revealing the bully underneath. Don't you start with that attitude. You will not do a damn thing. You know why. Because Sienna is pregnant. You are not going to call the cops on the grandfather and father of your future nephew. You would never survive the shame. You do not have the guts. He turned his back on me and swung the hammer. Crack. Another support beam groaned and splintered. He was right about one thing. He was betting on the old Everly. The Everly who begged for approval. The Everly who acted as the family doormat because she thought it was the price of love. But he did not know the Everly who had spent the last decade analyzing risk and liability for Northline Risk and Compliance. He did not know that I had learned that some assets are toxic and must be liquidated. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not run forward to wrestle the hammer from his hands. I turned around, walked back down the hallway, and stepped out onto the front porch. The wind cut through my coat, stinging my face, but the cold felt clarifying. It sharpened my senses. I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hands were steady. I dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher asked. My name is Everly Hayes, I said, my voice flat and clinical. I am at 404 Summit Avenue. I have just arrived home to find 2 intruders in my house. They are armed with sledgehammers and crowbars and are actively destroying the property. I am alone outside. Are you in immediate danger, ma'am? They are violent, I said, and they are destroying the structure of the home. Please send officers immediately. I hung up and stood in the snow. I could hear the muffled thuds of destruction continuing inside. Every bang was a piece of my heart breaking, but I forced myself to disconnect. I treated it like a file on my desk. Asset Victorian home. Status compromised. Action mitigation. It took less than 6 minutes for the first cruiser to arrive. The silent approach. Lights cutting through the heavy snowfall, painting the white drifts in alternating flashes of red and blue. Then a second cruiser. 2 officers stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters. Ma'am, the first officer called out. You're the homeowner. Yes, I said. They are in the back. The conservatory. The officers moved past me. Entering the open front door, I followed them, staying a few paces back. Police drop the weapons. Do it now. The shouting from inside was immediate. The banging stopped abruptly. I heard the metal clatter of the sledgehammer hitting the floor. Whoa, officers. It was Brent's voice, high-pitched and trembling. It's a misunderstanding. We are family. I am her brother. I walked into the room. The officers had them backed against the far wall, flashlights blinding them. Brent had his hands up, shaking. Raymond looked furious, his face red in the beam of the light. Officer, this is ridiculous, Raymond spat. I am her father. We are doing some renovations. Tell them, Everly, tell them to get the hell out of here. The officer turned to me. He was young, his breath visible in the freezing air rushing in through the broken windows. Ma'am, do you know these men? I looked at Raymond. He was glaring at me, his eyes burning with the absolute certainty that I would fold. He knew my buttons. He had installed them. Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass the family. Be the good girl. I know them, I said calmly. Okay, the officer said, relaxing slightly. So, this is a civil dispute, a domestic matter. No, I said, the word hung in the air, sharper than the glass shards on the floor. Raymond's jaw dropped. I did not invite them, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I did not give them a key. I did not authorize any renovations. They broke into my home while I was out of state, and they are destroying my property. This is breaking and entering, and criminal damage to property. Everly, Raymond roared, taking a step forward. Stay back, the officer barked, hand dropping to his taser. She is lying, Brent yelled. We are family, Mom sent us. As if summoned by the chaos, a car screeched to a halt outside. car doors slammed. Seconds later, my mother, Lydia Hartley, came rushing through the front door. Snow in her hair, her eyes wild. She ran into the room and threw herself between the officers and Raymond. "Stop! Stop it right now!" Lydia screamed. She looked at the officers with the practiced indignation of a woman who had never been told no in her life. "What are you doing to my husband? This is a family home. We are helping my daughter fix up the nursery." She turned to me, her eyes pleading, performing perfectly. "Everly, baby, tell them. We wanted to surprise you. We wanted to get the room ready for the baby. It was a surprise." The officer looked at me again, confusion clouding his face. "Ma'am, if this was a surprise renovation." I looked at the wreckage. My lemon tree, grown from a seed, lay crushed under a boot print. The glass from 1920 turned to dust. The violation was absolute. I looked at my mother. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She thought she could rewrite reality just by speaking loud enough. She thought the word family was a magic spell that granted immunity from consequences. "It is not a surprise," I said, cutting through her hysteria. "It is a crime." I pointed a finger directly at my mother. "She is not the homeowner. I am the sole owner on the deed. She knows I did not want this. She coordinated this. She is an accomplice." Lydia gasped, a theatrical hand flying to her chest. "Everly, how can you—" I looked at the officer. "I want to press charges. Against all of them. I want them removed from my property. Now." The officer looked at the damage, then at the three people standing amidst it. The sheer scale of the destruction made the helping story fall apart. You do not help someone by smashing their windows with a crowbar in the middle of a snowstorm. "Turn around," the officer said to Raymond. "Hands behind your back." "You have got to be kidding me," Raymond growled. But he turned. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was better than any symphony. Click, click, click. They cuffed Brent next. He was crying now, actual tears streaming down his face. "Evie, please. My job. I can't have a record." Then they turned to Lydia. "Ma'am, step back or you will be detained for obstruction," the second officer warned. "I am not leaving my husband," she shrieked. "Fine," the officer said. He reached for her wrist. I watched as my entire immediate family was marched out of my home in handcuffs. The neighbors had come out onto their porches, drawn by the lights. They watched as Raymond Hartley, a deacon at the local church, was shoved into the back of a police cruiser. They watched Lydia wailing about injustice. They watched Brent sobbing. The cruisers pulled away, leaving deep tire tracks in the fresh snow. I stood alone in the conservatory. The wind howled through the gaping holes where the windows used to be. Snow was beginning to drift in, settling on the broken terracotta and the splintered wood. It was freezing, probably 10 degrees below zero with the wind chill. But for the first time in 37 years, I did not feel cold. I stood there, letting the icy wind hit my face, and I felt light, the crushing weight that had sat on my chest since childhood, the obligation to please, the fear of their judgment, the desperate need for their validation was gone. It had been replaced by a clarity as sharp and dangerous as the glass on the floor. I looked at the hole in my house. It could be fixed. Wood could be replaced. Glass could be cut. But the bridge to my family, that I had just burned to the ground. And as I watched the red taillights of the police cars fade into the snowy night, I knew one thing for certain. I did not want to put the fire out. I wanted to watch it burn. The silence that followed the police cruisers was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against my eardrums. The flashing red and blue lights had been violent, chaotic, but at least they were something. Now, there was only the hollow sound of the wind whistling through the jagged teeth of the broken conservatory windows and the settling of a house that had been violated. I walked through the rooms like a detective walking a grid. I did not feel like a homeowner anymore. I felt like a coroner. The dust was everywhere. It was not just the debris from the back room. The pulverized drywall and shattered glass had created a fine, ghostly powder that had drifted on the air currents, coating everything I owned. I walked into the library, a room I had finished restoring only 6 months ago. My boots left distinct, treaded prints on the Persian rug, a 1920 Harris semi-antique that I had spent 3 years tracking down. It was covered in a layer of white grit, the vibrant reds and deep indigos muted under the fallout of my father's rage. I ran a finger along the edge of a mahogany bookshelf. The dust came away thick and chalky. It coated the leaves of my snake plants. It settled in the crevices of the crown molding I had spent weekends scraping and repainting on a ladder until my shoulders screamed in protest. I stopped in the hallway and looked at a framed photo on the wall. It was from the day I closed on this place 4 years ago. In the picture, I was standing on the porch, holding a bottle of cheap champagne, looking exhausted but triumphant. I remembered that day vividly. I remembered the way Raymond had looked at the peeling paint and the sagging porch roof. He had not said congratulations. He had kicked a rotting board with the toe of his boot and said, "You are buying a headache, Everly. A single woman has no business with a money pit like this. You will never be able to handle it." He had been wrong. I had handled it. I had handled it with a ferocity that bordered on obsession. I taught myself how to route electrical wiring by watching videos at 2 in the morning. I learned the difference between load-bearing walls and partitions. I spent my weekends at salvage yards, hunting for period-correct brass hardware, haggling with old men who thought they could overcharge me because I was a woman in a sundress. I stripped 80 years of varnish off the staircase banister with chemical peels that burned my skin, just to reveal the original oak underneath. I did it because I wanted a fortress. I wanted a place that was undeniably, unshakably mine. My family never understood that. To them, my independence was not an achievement. It was an excuse to ignore my needs. Because I was capable, I was invisible, because Brent was a disaster. He was the center of their universe. It was the unspoken constitution of the Hartley family. Brent was the fragile vase that had to be carried with 2 hands, and I was the pack mule. If the mule stumbled, you whipped it. If the vase cracked, you blamed the floor for being too hard. I walked into the kitchen, the only room that felt relatively untouched. Though the cold draft from the back of the house was curling around my ankles, I did not make tea. I did not pour a drink. I sat down at the quartz island, another thing I had paid for in cash, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, a stark white square in the dim room. I took a breath, pushed my emotions into a steel box in the back of my mind, and locked it. I was not Everly the daughter right now. I was Everly Hayes, Senior Risk Analyst for Northline Risk and Compliance. My job was to look at disasters, corporate fraud, systemic failure, liability exposure, and find the narrative in the numbers. I turned tragedies into data points. I turned emotions into evidence. I created a new folder on my desktop. I named it simply Evidence. I opened a blank document and began to type. I logged the timeline, precise to the minute. 11:15 p.m. Arrived at residence. 11:16 p.m. Witnessed Raymond Hartley and Brent Hartley destroying the conservatory structure. 11:17 p.m. Verbal confrontation. Threats made by Raymond Hartley regarding leverage over my property due to Sienna Cole's pregnancy. 11:19 p.m. Call placed to 911. I uploaded the photos I had taken of the destruction before the police arrived. I noted the names of the responding officers, Officer McCarthy and Officer Davidson. I logged the case number the police had given me on a small card. Then, I opened a different file. This was a spreadsheet I had kept hidden for 6 years. It was password protected. The file name was benign, Tax Docs, but the tab inside was labeled Brent Ledger. I stared at the grid. It was a waterfall of red numbers. It started 6 years ago with a short-term loan for a car deposit because Brent had totaled his previous vehicle while driving tired. Or so he said. Then it was rent assistance when he got fired from the warehouse job for personality conflicts. Then it was legal fees for a bar fight he swore he did not start. Then it was the investment in a crypto mining scheme that vanished overnight. I scrolled down to the bottom. I highlighted the sum column. $112,450. I whispered the number out loud to the empty kitchen. $112,450. That was the price of my guilt. That was the cost of buying my mother's temporary affection. Every time I wrote a check, Lydia would praise me. She would say, "You are such a good big sister. Everly, you are the rock of this family." I looked at the number, and for the first time, I saw it for what it really was. It was not charity. It was a subscription fee to a family that did not love me. They only loved my utility. I had not been saving Brent. I had been cushioning him. I had been the mattress placed at the bottom of a cliff so he could jump off again and again without ever breaking a bone. And because he never broke a bone, he never learned to stop jumping. I closed the spreadsheet. The nausea in my stomach was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I thought about the housewarming party. I had spent weeks planning it. I had ordered expensive catering. I had bought cases of wine. I had imagined the scene my parents walking in, seeing the beautiful home I had built, and finally saying, "We are proud of you." I wanted to believe that if I changed the setting, I could change the story. I thought that if I put them in a beautiful dream home, they would act like a dream family. I looked out the kitchen window at the swirling snow. The reflection in the glass showed a woman with pale skin and dark circles under her eyes, but her jaw was set. The house did not change my luck. The house was just wood and stone. The only thing that would change my luck was removing the parasites that were draining me dry. I stood up. I could not sleep here. The back of the house was open to the elements, and the energy in the air was too jagged, too violent. If I stayed, I would just stare at the hole in the wall and wonder why they hated me. I needed to be somewhere sterile. I grabbed my purse and my laptop. I packed a small bag with fresh clothes. I walked to the security panel by the front door and armed the system. It beeped aggressively, signaling that the perimeter sensors were active. I called the non-emergency police line as I walked out onto the porch. "This is Everly Hayes at 404 Summit," I told the dispatcher. "I have just filed a report regarding a break-in and vandalism. I am leaving the premises for the night. I want to be very clear, no one has permission to be on this property. If anyone, specifically the individuals arrested tonight, returns to the property, I want them arrested immediately for trespassing. There are no exceptions." "Understood. Ms. Hayes, we have the alert on the address." I locked the heavy oak door. I did not look back at the dark windows. I walked down the snowy steps to my car, the wind biting at my cheeks. I felt like I was walking away from a burning building, but I had no desire to call the fire department. I drove to a hotel downtown, a generic, high-rise place with keycards and blackout curtains. I checked in, went up to the room, and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was silent. It smelled of industrial cleaner and starch. It was perfect. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. They thought tonight was the climax. They thought the handcuffs were the worst of it. They were wrong. Tonight was just the opening statement. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I fell asleep without wondering if I had done enough to make them happy. I knew the answer now. I had done too much, and the bill was finally due. The morning sun that filtered through the blackout curtains of my hotel room was not gentle. It was a sharp, intrusive slice of white light that signaled the beginning of the siege. I had slept for maybe 4 hours, a fitful, shallow rest interrupted by dreams of glass shattering and my father's laughter. I rolled over and reached for my phone on the nightstand. I expected silence. I expected that perhaps, in the cold light of day, the alcohol or the adrenaline had worn off, and my family would be realizing the enormity of what they had done. I expected a missed call, a voicemail, maybe a hesitant text asking if we could talk. I was naive. The screen of my phone was lit up with notifications, stacked one on top of another like bricks in a wall. There were 17 text messages from my mother. Not one of them began with the words, "I am sorry." I unlocked the phone, my thumb hovering over the messages. The first one was not text. It was an image. It was a grainy, black and white ultrasound photo. The fetus was curled in that familiar alien shape of early life. The next image was a photo of Sienna. She was standing in profile, lifting her shirt to expose the curve of her belly. Her face was cropped out, but I recognized the kitchen in the background. It was my mother's kitchen. Then came the text. "Look at what you did, Everly. You just kicked your own flesh and blood out into the freezing snow. You kicked a baby onto the street. I hope you are proud of your big, empty house. It must be very cold in there without a heart." I felt a physical blow to my chest. It was a precision strike. My mother knew exactly where my armor was thinnest. She was weaponizing an unborn child, using a life that had not even started yet to justify the destruction of mine. This was the fog fear, obligation, guilt thick and suffocating. She wanted me to feel afraid of being alone, obligated to protect the family name, and guilty for a crime I did not commit. I sat up, the hotel sheets pooling around my waist. My instinct, the one conditioned by 3 decades of emotional subservience, was to call her, to explain, to say that I did not want the baby to hurt, that I only wanted my windows to stop breaking. But then I swiped to the next notification. It was a Facebook tag. My stomach dropped. I opened the app, and there it was, a post by Lydia Hartley, time-stamped at 6 a.m. I never thought I would have to air private family business, but my heart is shattered today. Last night, we went to surprise my daughter, Everly, to help build a nursery for her brother and his pregnant wife. We wanted to give the baby a warm place to stay, instead of a thank you. Everly called the police on her own father. She had them arrested like criminals. We were thrown out into the snow in the middle of the night. Please pray for our family, and especially for Sienna and the baby, who are suffering from the stress of this cruelty. The post had already been shared 42 times. I scrolled down to the comments. It was a public execution. Wow. Some people let money go to their heads. What a monster. Calling the cops on your dad for trying to help. That is sick. I hope she rots in that house alone. Keep your head up. Lydia, narcissists always show their true colors eventually. I saw names I recognized. Neighbors from my childhood street. People from my graduating class. Even a woman who lived 2 houses down from my new place had commented, "I saw the police cars last night." I had no idea she was that kind of person. Disgusting. My hands were shaking, not from cold, but from a mix of humiliation and fury. They were rewriting reality in real time. They had taken the sledgehammer from Raymond's hands and placed it in mine, painting me as the destroyer. Then came the message from Brent. It popped up at the top of my screen, displacing the vitriol from the strangers on Facebook. My lawyer says I have a case for intentional infliction of emotional distress. You traumatized Sienna. If she loses this baby, it is murder, and I will sue you for everything you have. Drop the charges. Send us $10,000 for the bail and the lawyer fees, and maybe we will settle this quietly. I stared at the screen. The shaking in my hands stopped. My lawyer? Brent did not have a lawyer. Brent had a public defender or a friend from a dive bar who took a few night classes. I read the message again. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Send us $10,000. The analyst in me woke up. I stopped reading the texts as a sister and started reading them as a forensic auditor. I looked at the structure of the sentence. It was a demand. It was a threat. It was an ultimatum tied to a financial transaction. He was blackmailing me. I did not reply. I did not type out a defense. I did not engage with the comments on Facebook. That was what they wanted. They wanted a fight because in a fight, they could play the victim. They wanted me to scream so they could point and say, "See, she is crazy." Instead, I took a screenshot. I captured Lydia's texts. I captured the ultrasound photo. I captured the Facebook post, ensuring the timestamp and the share count were visible. I captured the comments from the neighbors. I captured Brent's demand for money. I opened my cloud storage app and uploaded everything to the folder labeled Evidence. I created a subfolder named Harassment and Extortion. I drafted an email to Marina Klein, the attorney I had used for the closing of the house. She was expensive, sharp, and had zero patience for nonsense. I attached the screenshots. Marina, please see the attached correspondence from the individuals arrested at my property last night. Note the demand for cash in exchange for dropping a threatened lawsuit. I am not responding. Please advise on a restraining order. I hit send. I felt a strange sense of detachment. The woman on Facebook being called a monster felt like a character in a movie I was watching. I knew the truth, and the truth was sitting in a folder on a server in a data center, waiting for its moment. My phone buzzed again. I braced myself for another attack from Lydia. But it was a private message on Instagram. It was from Jenna, a friend from high school whom I had not spoken to in 5 years. "Hey Everly, I know we haven't talked in forever, but I saw your mom's post. It seemed off. I just wanted to show you this, in case you haven't seen it yet." Below the text was a link. My thumb hovered over it. The URL was for a popular crowdfunding site. I clicked it. The page loaded, and a wave of nausea rolled over me that was far worse than the text messages. The title of the campaign was in bold. Black letters, "Help a young family after tragic eviction." The photo was of Brent and Sienna. It was an old photo, taken maybe 2 years ago, where they looked happy and wholesome. Sienna was not even pregnant in the picture, but the caption told a different story. "Hi everyone, we are devastated to share that last night. My husband and I were kicked out of our home by a family member we trusted. I am 6 months pregnant, and we were forced out into a blizzard with nothing but the clothes on our backs. We are currently staying in a motel and need help with food, medical bills for the baby due to stress, and legal fees to fight for our rights. Any little bit helps." I looked at the number below the photo. Raise $2,450. Goal, $25,000. The donations were pouring in. $20 here, $50 there. Anonymous donors. People I knew. The neighbor who had commented on the Facebook post had donated $100. Heartbreaking. One donor wrote, "God bless you and the baby. So sorry your sister is such a witch." Wrote another. I stared at the climbing number. They were monetizing their crime. They had broken into my house, destroyed my property, and now they were selling tickets to the aftermath. It was a grift, a pure, unadulterated con. My finger hovered over the report fundraiser button. I could shut this down right now. I could post the police report. I could post the photos of the smashed conservatory. I could expose the lie before it went any further, but I stopped. I looked at the number again. $2,450. If I stopped them now, they would just spin it. They would say I was vindictive. They would say I was trying to starve a pregnant woman. They would keep the money they had already raised, and the narrative would remain muddy. But if I let it run, if I let them collect $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, then it was no longer a petty family dispute. It was wire fraud. It was theft by deception. It was a felony. They were building a trap, brick by brick, dollar by dollar. They thought they were building a safety net, but they were actually digging a pit, and the deeper they dug, the harder it would be for them to climb out when I finally kicked the ladder away. I closed the browser tab. I did not report the page. I went back to my evidence folder. I created a new spreadsheet. I named it Fraudulent Solicitation Log. I entered the URL. I noted the time. I noted the starting amount. I stood up and walked to the hotel window, looking out at the snow-covered city of St. Paul. Somewhere out there, Brent and Lydia were high-fiving. They were probably looking at that rising number and feeling invincible. They thought they had won the public relations war. They thought they had shamed me into silence. They were right about the silence, but they were wrong about the reason. I was not silent because I was ashamed. I was silent because I was letting them accrue interest on their own destruction. I picked up my phone and sent a short text to Marina. Do not send the cease and desist yet. I have found something else. I want to let it play out for 48 hours. I put the phone down. I ordered room service coffee, black, and oatmeal. I needed to eat. I needed to be strong. Because when the time came to open the doors of my dream home again, I was not going to be letting family in. I was going to be letting the federal prosecutors in. By 2 p.m, the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a cold, mechanical focus. I stood in the driveway of my home, watching a silver sedan pull up to the curb. The man who stepped out did not look like a contractor. He looked like an actuary who had wandered onto a construction site. This was Caleb Morrow. I had hired him at 7 a.m. after reading his reviews. He was not a general handyman. He was a forensic damage appraiser, a man who specialized in high-value insurance claims and historic structural integrity. He was expensive, but I was done with cheap solutions. Caleb shook my hand without smiling. He wore a heavy wool coat and carried a laser measure and a tablet in a thick, shockproof case. "Ms. Hayes," he said. His voice was dry, like shifting gravel. I pulled the property records on the way over. 1905 build. Victorian revival. Let us see the damage. I led him inside. The house was freezing. I had turned the heat off to stop the furnace from trying to warm the outdoors through the broken conservatory. Caleb walked through the wreckage with the dispassionate air of a surgeon examining a corpse. He took photos, dozens of them, from every angle. He measured the depth of the gouges in the floor. He noted the brand of the shattered glass. He stopped at the wall where Raymond had been smashing the support beams. He tapped the exposed studs with a pen, listening to the sound. "They compromised the load-bearing capacity here," Caleb said, typing into his tablet. "This is not cosmetic. You are going to need a structural engineer to sign off before you can even think about glass." He paused, scrolling through a document on his screen. He frowned, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "The scope of work here," Caleb said, gesturing to the smashed wall. "It matches the permit description, mostly, but the execution is amateur." I blinked. The cold air suddenly felt sharper in my lungs. "Excuse me, what permit?" Caleb looked at me, his eyebrows knitting together. "The remodeling permit, for the ground floor addition and conservatory conversion." "I did not apply for a permit," I said. My voice was steady, but my pulse began to hammer against my collarbone. "I did not authorize any work. That is why I called the police." Caleb stopped typing. He looked at me, then back at his tablet. He tapped the screen a few times, expanding a PDF file. "Ms. Hayes, I pulled the jacket from the Ramsey County database this morning. It is standard procedure before I do a site visit. There is an active permit issued 5 weeks ago." He turned the tablet toward me. There it was, an official document from the city. Applicant Everly Hayes. Project Nursery Addition and Structural Modification. I stared at the screen. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "That is impossible," I whispered. "There is more," Caleb said, his tone shifting from professional to cautious. "Usually, for a project of this size, I check for liens to ensure the insurance payout goes to the right party. Do you want to see the financing attached to the project?" I nodded. I could not speak. Caleb swiped to the next page. It was a filing for a home equity line of credit, or HELOC. Lender Midwest Heritage Bank. Borrower Everly Hayes. Amount $65,000. Date opened November 17th. $65,000. I grabbed the edge of the granite island to steady myself. My knees felt like water. $65,000 of debt, secured against the house I had poured my soul into. Show me the signature, I said. Caleb zoomed in on the bottom of the document. There it was. Everly Hayes. It was my signature. The loop of the E. The sharp cross of the H. It was perfect. If I had been a bank teller, I would have cleared it without a second glance. It was a forgery of terrifying quality. I did not sign this, I said. The words tasted like ash. November 17th, 5 weeks ago, I pulled out my phone. My hands were trembling, but my mind was racing, connecting dots that I had not even known existed. I opened my calendar app and scrolled back to November. November 17th. I was in Seattle, I said, showing the calendar to Caleb, though he was just the messenger. I was at the Pacific Northwest Risk Management Conference. I was in a seminar on liability shielding from 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. I opened my email. I searched for Delta. I found the boarding passes. I found the hotel receipt from the Sheraton. I had checked in on the 16th and checked out on the 19th. I had physical, digital, irrefutable proof that I was 2,000 miles away when this document was signed in a bank branch in St. Paul. It is identity theft, Caleb said quietly, and mortgage fraud. He took the tablet back and scrolled down to the notary section. Someone had to witness it. Someone had to vouch for you if you were not there, or if someone was pretending to be you. He turned the screen back to me. Witness signature Raymond Hartley. The air left the room. It was not just a signature. It was a smoking gun. My father had not just smashed my windows in a fit of rage. That was just the theater. The real crime had happened 5 weeks ago. In a quiet office with a pen and a smile, Raymond had witnessed the signature. That meant he had either brought someone in to pose as me, or he had used his relationship with a banker to bypass the physical ID check. He had leveraged his reputation as a deacon, as a pillar of the community, to rob his own daughter. They did not come here to build a nursery, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. They came here to cover their tracks. It made perfect sense. The construction, the smashing of the walls. If they destroyed the conservatory and started a renovation, they could justify where the money went. If I asked why there was construction, they would gaslight me, say they were helping, and meanwhile, the $65,000 would vanish into the ether. Caleb, I said, I need you to document everything. Every nail, every scratch, but I need to make a phone call. Do what you need to do, Caleb said. He went back to measuring the wall, but he was moving quieter now, as if he was in a room with a bomb that had not yet gone off. I sat on a dust-covered stool and dialed the number on the back of my debit card. Midwest Heritage Bank, Fraud Department, I said to the automated voice. When a human operator finally picked up, I did not scream. I became Northline Risk and Compliance. My name is Everly Hayes. I am reporting a fraudulent home equity line of credit taken out in my name, account number ending in 442. I am the victim of identity theft involving a family member. I need an immediate freeze on this line, and I need a fraud hold on all my accounts. One moment. Ms. Hayes, the operator said, sounding alarmed by my tone. I see the line here. It looks like it has been heavily utilized. Utilized, I asked. How much is left? The current available balance is $340, the operator said. There have been multiple transfers over the last month. Most of them were just under the $10,000 reporting threshold, withdrawals to cash, and transfers to a third-party account. $65,000. Gone in 5 weeks. I want the transaction log, I said. I want the IP addresses for every login. I want the physical branch location where the loan was originated, and I want the name of the loan officer who approved it. I can initiate an investigation, the operator said, but we will need a police report. You will have it within the hour, I said. I hung up. I sat there for a moment, looking at the dust motes dancing in the cold light. I had thought last night was the worst of it. I had thought the betrayal was emotional. I thought they just didn't respect my boundaries. I was wrong. This was predation. They had eaten my equity. They had stolen my credit rating. My father had looked a loan officer in the eye, signed his name next to a forgery of mine, and walked away with the price of a luxury car. All while I was sitting in a conference room in Seattle learning about risk. I opened the evidence folder on my laptop. I created a new subfolder, Financial Crimes. I took a picture of the permit on Caleb's tablet. I uploaded the flight receipts from Seattle. I uploaded the hotel folio. I downloaded the initial credit report notification that I had missed because it went to an old email address, another detail they must have changed. I looked at the Brent Ledger spreadsheet I had opened the night before. $112,000 given freely. And it wasn't enough. It was never enough. They had to take what I wouldn't give. I thought about Raymond's face last night, the way he smiled. You will not dare kick out a pregnant woman. He wasn't protecting a baby. He was protecting a crime scene. As long as they were occupying the house, as long as they were renovating, I wouldn't look too closely at the paperwork. They needed access to the mail. They needed access to the physical address to keep the ruse going. I stood up. My legs felt solid again. "Caleb," I called out. He looked up from the floor. "Yes. Can you write an affidavit stating that the work done here was destructive and not consistent with a professional renovation?" "Absolutely," he said. "It is butchery." "Good," I said. "Add it to the file." I walked to the front door and looked out at the street. The snow was still falling, covering the tracks of the police cars from the night before. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the victim. I picked up my phone and called Marina Klein. "Everly," she answered. "I got your email about the fundraising. We are drafting the letter." "Forget the fundraising," I said. "That is petty cash. We are going to the district attorney." "Why, what happened?" "I just found out why they broke into my house." "Marina," I said, watching a snowplow drive by, burying the world in white. "My father didn't just break a window. He forged my signature on a $65,000 loan, and I'm going to make sure he dies in prison." The line went silent. "I will clear my schedule," Marina said. "Get here now." I hung up. I took one last look at my broken house. They had tried to destroy it to hide their theft, but all they had done was open it up so I could see the rot inside the walls. And now, I was going to cut it out. The Ramsey County Recorder's office smelled of stale coffee, floor wax, and the dry, dusty scent of bureaucracy. It was a smell I usually associated with the mundane business of property taxes and zoning variances. Today, however, it smelled like a crime scene. I stood at the counter, watching the clerk type into her terminal. Her nails were painted a bright, chipping neon pink, a strange splash of color against the gray surroundings. I had asked for a complete title history of my property, specifically looking for any filings in the last 90 days. My hands were gripping the edge of the counter so hard that my knuckles had turned white. The revelation of the fraudulent loan, the $65,000 home equity line of credit, had been a gut punch. But the analyst in me, the part of my brain that assessed catastrophic risk for a living, whispered that the loan was just the symptoms. I needed to find the disease. "Here it is," the clerk said, her gum snapping softly. There was a recording on November 19th, a quitclaim deed. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. A quitclaim deed is the nuclear option of property transfer. It is a fast, dirty way to move ownership from one person to another, often used in divorces or between family members. It comes with no warranties, no title search, just a signature and a stamp. "Can I see it?" I asked, my voice tight. She slid the paper across the counter. I looked at the document. The room seemed to narrow until only the white paper existed. Grantor Everly Hayes. Grantee. The Hartley Family Living Trust. Conveyance 49% interest in the property located at 404 Summit Avenue. Consideration $1. They had not stolen the whole house. That would have triggered too many red flags. Too many title insurance alerts. They had stolen 49%. Just enough to be a minority owner. Just enough to claim residency. Just enough to be impossible to evict without a complex court order. The Hartley Family Living Trust. I read aloud. It sounded official. It sounded wholesome. It was a lie. There was no trust. There was just a shell entity created to siphon my assets. I looked at the signature. Again, it was mine. Or rather, it was the ghost of mine, traced by a hand that had practiced it until it was muscle memory. And there, in the notary block, was the stamp. Riverbend Mobile Notary. Commission expires. May 2026. It was not notarized at a bank this time. It was a mobile notary. Someone who came to you, someone who met you in a coffee shop or a parking lot. I pulled out my phone and dialed Marina Klein immediately. I did not care that it was Saturday. I did not care that she charged $400 an hour. "Everly," Marina answered on the second ring. "I am drafting the fraud affidavit for the bank. What is it?" "It is worse than the bank," I said. walking away from the counter to a quiet corner of the hallway. They filed a quitclaim deed. They transferred 49% of my house to a trust they created. November 19th, the day I was flying back from Seattle. There was a silence on the line. A heavy, pregnant silence that terrified me more than any scream. "Marina. Listen to me carefully. Everly," Marina said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "You need to understand what they are doing. This is not just theft. This is a partition strategy." "What does that mean?" "If they own 49% of the house, they have the right to force a sale," Marina explained. "It is called a partition action. They can go to court and say that they want to liquidate their share. Since a house cannot be cut in half, the court will order the property sold at auction. You would lose the house. They would walk away with half the equity. It is a classic predator move used against elderly people and widows." I felt the blood drain from my face. They did not want to live in my conservatory. They did not care about the nursery. They wanted to liquidate my life. They wanted to turn my 4 years of restoration, my sweat, my sanctuary, into a check they could split 3 ways. "We need to stop it," I said. "I am filing a lis pendens right now," Marina said. "It is a legal notice that the property is subject to a lawsuit. It effectively freezes the title. No one can buy, sell, or borrow against it until we resolve this. But Everly, we are in a war now. If that deed stands, you are co-owners with them." "It won't stand," I said. "I was in Seattle. I can prove it." "I believe you," Marina said. "But we need to prove who actually signed it. We need to know who stood in front of that mobile notary and pretended to be you." I hung up and looked at the deed again. There was a tracking number at the bottom. It had been mailed to the recorder's office via a private shipping center, a franchise place called the Mail Room on Grand Avenue. I looked at the timestamp on the recording. It was received at 9 in the morning on the 19th. That meant it was dropped off the evening before. I drove to the mail room. The snow was piling up on the streets, turning St. Paul into a white, muffled labyrinth. I parked my rental car and walked into the shipping center. It was small, smelling of cardboard and packing tape. The owner was behind the counter, a balding man watching a football game on a small TV. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. I placed my business card on the counter. Northline Risk and Compliance. It looked official. It looked like authority. "My name is Everly Hayes," I said. "I am investigating a case of identity theft and mail fraud involving a document shipped from this location on November 18th. I have the tracking number." The man looked up, eyeing the card. "I can't give out customer info without a warrant." "Lady, I don't want customer info," I lied smoothly. "I already have the info. I have the bank records. I have the police report number." I rattled off the case number I had gotten the night before. "What I need is to verify the drop-off so I don't have to list your business as a co-conspirator in the federal lawsuit I am filing on Monday." It was a bluff, but it was a scary one. The word federal usually does the trick. The man paled. "Now hold on. We just shipped the boxes. We don't know what's in them." "Then prove it," I said. "Show me who dropped this off. Clear your name." He hesitated, then sighed and turned to his computer. He typed in the tracking number I gave him. November 18th, 5:45 p.m., Dropbox. He clicked a few keys and pulled up the security camera feed on a second monitor. He scrubbed the timeline back. "Here," he said. I leaned in, holding my breath. The camera showed the front counter and the glass door leading to the parking lot. It was dark outside, the streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. A car pulled up. It was a Lexus SUV, pearl white. I knew that car. It was my mother's car. I had ridden in the back seat of that car 100 times. I felt a spike of validation. Lydia. It had to be Lydia. The driver's door opened. A figure stepped out. The person was wearing an oversized gray hoodie. The hood pulled up low over their face. They wore black leggings and heavy winter boots. They walked into the store, head down. Avoiding the interior cameras, they walked straight to the drop box, slid a thick envelope inside, and turned around. As they turned, the hood slipped back just an inch, just enough. I saw the profile. I saw the sharp nose. I saw the way the blonde hair was tucked behind the ear. And I saw something else. The figure moved with a quick, athletic stride. There was no waddle. There was no hand on the lower back to support a heavy belly. The coat was unzipped, and the hoodie underneath was loose. But as the person turned, the fabric pulled tight against their stomach. It was flat. I froze. I rewound the video in my mind. The ultrasound, the photos Lydia had sent me this morning, the 6 months pregnant claim in the fundraiser, The woman in the video was Sienna Cole, my brother's wife, but she was not pregnant. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. The pregnancy was the shield. It was the ultimate weapon in the family arsenal. You can't evoke a pregnant woman. You can't stress out the baby. They had used it to break into my house. They had used it to guilt the police. They were using it right now to raise thousands of dollars from strangers online. But here, on a grainy security tape from 5 weeks ago, Sienna was walking like a track star. She was driving my mother's car. She was mailing the deed that would steal half my house. "Do you need a copy?" the owner asked, nervous now. "Yes," I said. "I need a copy, and I need you to sign a statement that this is unedited footage." I walked out of the store 10 minutes later with a USB drive in my pocket. The cold air hit me, but I didn't feel it. I felt a burning, righteous fury. Sienna wasn't a victim. She wasn't a passive vessel being dragged along by the Hartley men. She was the architect, or at least, she was the willing executioner. She was the one who put on the hoodie. She was the one who drove the car. She was the one who impersonated me. I sat in my car and pulled out a notepad. I needed to visualize this. I needed to see the web they had spun. I drew a grid. I called it the case map. Subject Raymond Hartley Roll the muscle, the face. Action witnessed the fraudulent HELOC signature. Physically destroyed the conservatory to hide the lack of a nursery. Motive control, envy, access to my credit line. Subject Brent Hartley Roll the dependent, the beneficiary. Action received the funds. Spent the money likely gambling or debt repayment. Motive desperation. He is the black hole where the money goes. Subject Lydia Hartley Roll, the PR machine. Action. Social media manipulation, emotional blackmail, provided the vehicle for the crime. Motive protecting Brent, maintaining the family image. Subject Sienna, Cole Roll the ghost, the actor. Action impersonated me for the notary, likely using a fake ID, mailed the deed. Faked the pregnancy to create a liability shield. Motive survival, greed. She wants the house just as much as they do. I looked at the map. It was a conspiracy. It was a RICO case in miniature. They thought they were playing a game of emotional chicken. They thought that if they pushed hard enough, if they cried loud enough about the baby, I would fold. They were banking on the fact that I would never drag them into a courtroom because I was too afraid of losing them. But they didn't know I had the video. They didn't know I had the flight records. They didn't know I knew about the fake pregnancy. I tapped the pen against the paper. I could go to the police right now. I had enough for an arrest warrant, but if I went now, they would scramble. They would claim it was a mistake. They would say Sienna had a miscarriage due to the stress. They would find a way to wiggle out, to make it messy. No, I needed them to commit fully. I needed them to think they had won. I picked up my phone and opened the crowdfunding page again. It was up to $3,000. Brent had posted an update. "Thank you all for the support. We are meeting with a lawyer tomorrow to get our home back." Their confidence was their weakness. They were so sure I was the scared little girl who just wanted her daddy's approval that they were getting careless. I decided then and there, I would not strike yet. I would let them walk into the room. I would let them sit down. I would let them put their lies on the record. I texted Marina. "Set up a mediation meeting. Tell them I am ready to talk. Tell them I want to discuss a settlement regarding the repairs and the living situation." Marina replied instantly, "Are you sure we should just hit them with the fraud charges?" I typed back, "I want them all in one room. I want them to say it to my face while the recorder is running. Set it up for Monday." I started the engine. The heater blasted warm air against my frozen hands. I looked at the USB drive sitting on the passenger seat. It was small, innocent looking. But it was not just a video file. It was the key to my freedom. I was going to invite my family over one last time, but this time, I would be the one bringing the hammer. The silence I had sought at the hotel did not last. By Sunday afternoon, I had returned to the house. I had no choice. To abandon the property now would be to concede possession. And in the eyes of the law and my family, possession was 9/10 of the war. I sat in the living room, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The heating system was working overtime to combat the draft from the boarded-up conservatory, but the chill settled deep in my bones. I was not cold because of the temperature. I was cold because I was under siege. They had been bailed out. I knew this because the harassment began promptly at 2 a.m. on Monday. I was dozing on the sofa, a heavy flashlight gripping in my hand. When the pounding started on the front door, it was rhythmic, authoritative, and terrifying. I checked the peephole. It was the police, not the officers from the night of the arrest, but 2 new ones. I opened the door, keeping the chain latch engaged. "Can I help you?" Ms. Hayes, the taller officer asked, shining a light into my eyes. We received a call requesting a wellness check. The caller stated you sent a text message threatening self-harm and that you might have a weapon. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my face remained stone. This was the swatting light version. It was a tactic designed to humiliate me, to wake me up, to make me look unstable to the authorities. I did not send any such message, I said clearly. I am the victim of a crime perpetrated by my family 2 nights ago. This call is retaliation. Who made the report? It was an anonymous tip from a concerned relative, the officer said, though his posture relaxed slightly as he saw I was lucid and calm. Ma'am, we need to come in and just verify there are no weapons and that you are safe. You can verify I am safe from here, I said. I am not suicidal. I am being harassed. If you enter my home without a warrant, I will file a complaint with your sergeant. Please log this interaction as a false report filed by Lydia or Brent Hartley. They hesitated, then left. I watched their taillights fade, my hands shaking only after the door was locked. They wanted to break my sleep. They wanted to break my mind. They wanted me to be too exhausted to fight. 3 hours later, as I was drinking black coffee and reviewing the generated logs from the bank, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was a man in a neon safety vest holding a clipboard. City inspections, he muttered when I opened the door. Got a report about unpermitted demolition and structural instability. I need to inspect the foundation. I leaned against the doorframe. Let me guess. The report came in anonymously this morning. Look, lady, I just get the ticket. If you have got dangerous debris, I have to red tag the house. That means you have to vacate immediately. That was the play. They wanted me out. If the city condemned the house, I would be forced to leave, and the property would sit empty, vulnerable to squatters who happen to have the last name Hartley. The permit on file is a forgery, I told the inspector. There is an active police investigation regarding the damage. It is a crime scene. You are welcome to inspect the exterior, but if you red tag this house based on a fraudulent tip, I will sue the city for aiding and abetting an extortion scheme. Do you want to be named in that lawsuit? The inspector blinked. He looked at the clipboard, then at me. He scribbled something down. I will mark it as pending investigation. He walked away. I closed the door and locked it, but as I turned the deadbolt, I felt a snag. The key turned, but it felt gritty. I frowned. I grabbed my coat and went out to the side porch, where I kept a hidden lockbox for emergencies. It was tucked behind a loose brick near the gas meter. I pulled the brick away. The box was there, but it was shiny. It was new. I stared at it. My lockbox was 5 years old, weathered by Minnesota winters. This one still had the sticker residue on the back. I dialed the combination to my old box. It did not open. They had swapped it. They had come back, likely while I was at the hotel or while I was dealing with the police at 2 a.m, and they had replaced the lockbox. They wanted me to think I was secure, but they had the key. They were not just trying to scare me. They were maintaining access. They were marking their territory like wolves. I did not open the new box. I left it there. I called a locksmith. Then I called a security company. I want the package you sell to jewelry stores. I told the sales rep, I want cameras covering every inch of the perimeter. I want motion sensors. I want glass break detectors. And I want it done today. It cost me $4,000. I put it on a credit card I knew they did not have access to. By sunset, my Victorian home had the surveillance capabilities of a CIA safe house. I sat in the kitchen, watching the monitor grid on my iPad. I could see the street. I could see the alley. I could see the broken conservatory. I had also received an email from Marina. Temporary restraining order granted. They are to stay 500 feet away from you and the property. Sheriff is serving them now. I felt a brief moment of relief, but it was shattered by the sound of a heavy engine rumbling outside. I looked at the monitor. A U-Haul truck was backing into my driveway. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I watched on the screen as the driver's door opened. Brent jumped out. He was not wearing the shame of a man arrested 48 hours ago. He was wearing a grin. He was wearing confidence. He walked around to the back of the truck and opened the rolling door. It was empty. He was not moving out. He was moving in. I watched as he waved to Mrs. Gable, my next-door neighbor, who was shoveling her walk. I could not hear him through the camera, so I cracked the kitchen window just an inch. Misunderstanding. Brent's voice drifted in, loud and boisterous. Evie is having a bit of a breakdown. We are just bringing some things over to help stabilize the situation. The house is going to be in the family trust, so we are just getting settled." He was planting the flag. He was telling the neighborhood that he had won, that I was the crazy sister who needed a keeper. I did not go outside. I did not scream at him to get off my driveway. That was the old Everly. The old Everly would have run out in her slippers, crying, asking him why he was doing this. The old Everly would have given him the reaction he craved. The new Everly picked up the phone. "Dispatch, this is Everly Hayes. I have a temporary restraining order against Brent Hartley. He is currently in my driveway with a moving truck. He is in violation of the court order. We have the order on file. Ma'am, sending a unit now." I sat by the window and waited. Brent was dragging a heavy box from the back of the truck, a box he must have brought from his apartment. He marched up the porch steps. He reached for the front door. He tried the handle, locked. He pulled a key from his pocket. He slid it into the lock. It did not turn. I had the locksmith rekey every cylinder in the house 3 hours ago. I saw Brent's face change on the camera monitor. The grin vanished. He jiggled the key. He kicked the door. "Everly," he shouted. "Open the damn door. I know you are in there." I took a sip of my tea. It was Earl Grey. It was delicious. 2 minutes later, a police cruiser rolled up silently behind the U-Haul, blocking it in. I watched Brent freeze. I watched him try to spin the story again. I saw his arms waving. I saw him pointing at the house, pointing at his pregnant wife's non-existent nursery. The officer shook his head. He pointed to the paper in his hand, the service of the restraining order. He pointed to the U-Haul. Brent was arguing. He was getting aggressive. The officer's hand moved to his belt. Finally, Brent threw his hands up. He got back in the truck. The officer made him reverse all the way out into the street. The officer handed him a citation through the window, a violation of a protective order while out on bail. That was a revocable offense. Brent drove away, the gears of the truck grinding as angrily as his teeth. I felt a cold satisfaction. But then my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Facebook. Lydia had posted again. "My heart breaks for my daughter. She is being manipulated by people who do not care about her. We tried to bring her things, to help her through this episode, and she called the police on her own brother. We believe she is under the influence of a lawyer who is trying to drain her assets. Please, if you see Everly, tell her we love her. We just want to bring her home." She was pivoting. I was no longer the monster. I was the victim of outsiders. This was a dangerous narrative. If they could convince a judge I was mentally incompetent or being unduly influenced, they could try to get power of attorney. It tied perfectly into the fake trust they had set up. I closed the app. They were good. I had to give them that. They were persistent like mold. I was about to turn off the lights when I saw movement on the front porch camera. I tensed, ready to dial 911 again. But it wasn't Brent. It was Mrs. Higgins, the elderly woman who lived across the street. She was wrapped in a heavy parka, holding something small in her gloved hand. She looked nervous. She kept glancing at the street. I went to the door and opened it. "Mrs. Higgins." "Everly, dear," she whispered, her breath puffing in the cold air. I saw the commotion. I saw the police. "I am sorry for the noise," I said gently. No, she waved a hand. "I never liked that brother of yours. He parks on my lawn." She looked around again, then pressed a small black USB drive into my hand. "I have one of those video doorbells," she said. "It points right at your driveway. I check it to see if my packages arrive. I saw them. The night they broke in, before the police came." I looked at the drive. "Thank you. Mrs. Higgins, you need to hear what they said. Dear, it didn't sound right. It didn't sound like a renovation." She patted my hand and hurried back across the snowy street. I went back inside and plugged the drive into my laptop. There were 3 files. I clicked on the one time-stamped 10 minutes before I arrived home on Friday night. The video was grainy, shot from across the street, but the audio was surprisingly clear in the quiet winter night. I saw Raymond and Brent standing on my porch. Brent was holding the crowbar. Raymond was smoking a cigarette. "Are you sure it is in the conservatory?" Brent asked. His voice was jittery. "It has to be." Raymond's voice answered. It was low, gravelly. "I checked the blueprints. The original owner put a hollow space behind the north wall wainscoting. That is where the old man said he kept it." I froze. "But if we smash it, won't she notice?" Brent asked. Raymond laughed. It was the laugh I had heard in my nightmares. "We will tell her it is for the nursery. We will gut the room, grab the box, and frame it back up before she even knows the difference. She is stupid. Brent, she sees what she wants to see." And if it is not there, it is there, Raymond hissed. Smash the glass first. Make it look like a remodel. Then smash the stud wall. The safe is behind the second stud from the left. We get the cash. We pay off your bookie. And we leverage the house for the rest. The video ended. I sat in the silence of my kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator the only sound. They were not just destroying my house to hide the loan fraud. That was secondary. They were looking for a safe. The old man said he kept it. My mind raced. The previous owner, Mr. Henderson, had been a recluse. He had died without a will. I bought the house from the estate. There had been rumors of him hiding money, but I dismissed them as urban legends. Raymond knew something. Raymond had done his homework. He believed there was a physical cache of money or something valuable hidden in my conservatory walls. I stood up and walked to the back of the house. The wind whistled through the plywood I had nailed up. I shined my flashlight on the wall they had been destroying. The second stud from the left. They had smashed the drywall, but they hadn't gotten through the lath and plaster fully before I arrived. The wood was splintered, but the cavity was still mostly obscured. My heart was pounding in my throat. I was not just fighting a family of narcissists. I was fighting a family of treasure hunters who had convinced themselves that my house was their ATM. They broke in because they were desperate. Pay off your bookie. That was the key. Brent wasn't just broke. He was in deep with dangerous people. That explained the urgency. That explained the $65,000 stolen and burned in 5 weeks. That explained the desperation to get back into the house tonight. They needed that safe. I stepped closer to the wall. I held the flashlight in my mouth. I reached into the hole they had made. My fingers brushed against something cold. Not wood. Metal. I stopped. I did not pull it out. If I pulled it out, it was just an object. But if I left it there, if I used it as bait, I slowly pulled my hand back. I walked back to the kitchen and sat down. I had the video. I had the confession. The safe is behind the second stud. This changed everything. They were not just abusers. They were burglars, and they were terrified. I looked at the camera monitor. The street was empty, but I knew they were out there, watching, waiting. I picked up my phone and texted Marina. I have a video of them conspiring to commit burglary. They are looking for a hidden safe in my walls. Do not tell the police yet. Why? Marina replied instantly. Because, I typed, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time in days. I want to invite them in to find it. I was going to set a trap, and I was going to use their own greed to spring it. The metal box I pulled from the wall cavity was cold and heavy, covered in a fine layer of plaster dust and insulation fibers. I sat on the floor of the decimated conservatory, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, illuminating the rusted lockbox. It was not an antique safe left by the previous owner, Mr. Henderson. It was a modern sentry safe, fireproof and waterproof, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $40. My father had smashed my home to find this. He had been convinced by rumors of a dead man's fortune, but as I looked at the box, I felt a sickening intuition. Mr. Henderson had died in 1998. This box had a barcode sticker on the bottom that was barely faded. I did not have the key, but I did have the tools my family had left behind. I picked up the red crowbar Brent had dropped. With a sharp, violent leverage, I popped the latch. The metal shrieked, a sound that echoed the scream of my house 2 nights ago. I lifted the lid. There was no cash. There were no gold coins. There were no bearer bonds. Instead, there was a stack of papers, rubber banded together, and a small black notebook. I picked up the notebook. It was Brent's handwriting. I recognized the sloppy loop of his L's and the hard press of the pen. It was a ledger. But unlike the one I kept for his loans, this one was a record of losses. October 4th minus 2,000. Vikings game. October 10th minus 4,500. Online slots. November 1st. Loan shark. Vinny. Due date. 15th. Need 6,000. I flipped through the pages. It was a chronicle of addiction. Brent had not just been unlucky. He had been drowning. And then, I found the page that made my blood turn to ice. November 14th. Dad knows. Says he has a plan. Says Everly has equity. Says we can use the nursery cover to get inside and get the box before Vinny finds it. I dropped the notebook. The narrative shifted in my mind, the pieces clicking together with the precision of a locking mechanism. Raymond did not think there was an old man's safe. That was a lie he told Brent to keep him calm. Or perhaps a lie Brent told Raymond to justify the demolition. No. The truth was simpler and pathetic. Brent had hidden his debt records here likely during a Thanksgiving visit years ago when he helped me paint to hide them from Sienna. But now, with the loan sharks circling, he needed to retrieve them to prove something. Or perhaps there was something else in the stack. I dug deeper into the papers. I found promissory notes. I found threats printed from encrypted emails. And at the bottom, I found the real reason for the panic. It was a confession note, drafted but never sent, addressed to the Minnesota Gaming Control Board. Brent had been running a side hustle, laundering money for a local bookie through his personal accounts. If this box was found by the police or by me, he wasn't just facing bankruptcy, he was facing federal prison for racketeering. He had destroyed my house not to find treasure, but to destroy evidence. I took photos of every page. I bagged the box. I sealed it with tape. This was Exhibit A. By Monday morning, I was sitting in the conference room of a private investigator named Marcus Thorne, whom Marina had recommended. Thorne was a former forensic accountant for the FBI. He looked at the documents I had uploaded to the cloud with a predator's focus. "You were right about the HELOC," Thorne said, projecting a flowchart onto the wall screen. "We traced the $65,000. It evaporated in 11 days. He tapped the screen. "Here's the breakdown. 20,000 went to a shell company in Nevis, which is a known front for offshore gambling sites. 15,000 went to a debt consolidation service that, when I ran the address, turned out to be a strip mall mailbox in New Jersey linked to organized crime." "And the rest?" I asked. "Cash withdrawals," Thorne said. "ATM limits were overridden. They went to branches all over the Twin Cities, pulling out 2,000 or 3,000 at a time. But here's the catch. To override the limit, you need telephone verification." Thorne slid a USB drive across the table. "Midwest Heritage Bank records all customer service calls for quality assurance. We subpoenaed the logs this morning based on your fraud affidavit." He clicked play. The voice that filled the room was my father's. "Yes, this is Everly Hayes," Raymond said. His voice was pitched slightly higher, attempting a softer cadence, but the gravel was unmistakable. "I am at the branch on Rice Street. I need to authorize a cash withdrawal." "Security verification," the bank operator said. "What is the name of your first childhood pet?" There was a pause that broke my heart. "Buster," Raymond said. I closed my eyes. Buster was a golden retriever we had when I was 7. He was the dog who slept at the foot of my bed when I was afraid of the dark. He was the one pure memory I had of my childhood home, and Raymond had used his name, my password, to steal the roof over my head. "He cleared the security," Thorne said, stopping the recording. "But the money didn't just go to Brent's bookies. Look at this transfer." He pointed to a line item for $8,000, Payee, Hayes Consulting. "I don't have a consulting firm," I said. "I work for Northline." "Exactly," Thorne said. "We pulled the incorporation papers for Hayes Consulting. It was registered 4 weeks ago." He pulled up a document. "Registered agent Sienna Marie Cole. She set up a fake business using your initial," Thorne said. "She tried to make it look like you were paying yourself, to muddy the waters if an auditor looked, but the bank account for the consulting firm, it is joint owned by Sienna Cole and Brent Hartley." "She is not a victim," I said, my voice flat. "She is the money launderer. She is the CFO of this little criminal enterprise," Thorne corrected. "And she is sloppy. She used her own social security number to open the account." I looked at the web of lies displayed on the screen. It was comprehensive. They had stolen my identity, my money, and my peace, and they were using a baby as a shield. "The baby," I said. "Thorne, look at the spending. Is there anything for prenatal care, doctor's cribs?" Thorne scrolled through the thousands of lines of data. He shook his head. "Liquor stores, gas stations, casinos, DraftKings, not a single diaper, not a single OBGYN copay." I pulled out my phone. It was time to test the shield. I opened my text thread with Sienna. I had not replied to her since the photo of the belly. I typed a single sentence. "I have the bank records for Hayes Consulting. Are you sure you are pregnant?" Sienna: "Or is that just another shell company?" I hit send. I watched the screen. The 3 dots of typing appeared almost instantly. Then they disappeared. Then they appeared again. A minute later, my phone buzzed. It was an image. It was an ultrasound strip. A classic, blurry black and white scan of a fetus. It had a label at the top, Baby Hartley. Underneath, she texted, "You are sick," questioning a mother's stress. "My lawyer will love this harassment." I did not reply. Instead, I forwarded the image to Thorne. "Metadata," I said. Thorne dragged the image into his software. He didn't even need to run a deep scan. He just pointed to the top right corner of the image. There was a faint, translucent watermark. Premier 4D ultrasound. Cleveland, Ohio. We are in Minnesota, I said. And she hasn't left the state in 6 months. Thorne zoomed in on the timestamp embedded in the file data. June 12, 2019. This is a stock image, Thorne said. Or an old scan from someone else. She downloaded this from the internet or stole it from a friend. She is not pregnant, I said. The realization was total. The belly in the hoodie was padding. The waddle was acting. The nursery was a cover story for the demolition. This changes the legal landscape, Marina said, stepping into the room with a stack of files. If there is no pregnancy, the sympathy card they are playing with the judge for the restraining order violation evaporates. It also proves premeditated fraud. They invented a dependent to create financial hardship. We can arrest them now, Thorne said. We have the HELOC fraud, the wire fraud, the identity theft, and the fake solicitation of funds. I looked at the screen. I looked at Raymond's name next to the Buster password. I looked at Brent's debt ledger. I looked at Sienna's fake ultrasound. If I arrested them now, they would be picked up separately. They would lawyer up. They would blame each other. Raymond would say he was tricked by Brent. Brent would say he was coerced by Raymond. Sienna would play the confused wife. I didn't want a messy trial where they could hide behind family misunderstanding. I wanted them to confess. I wanted them to sit in a room, thinking they were winning, and lay their cards on the table. No arrests yet, I said. Marina looked at me, concerned. Everly, you are playing with fire. They are desperate. If they know you know. They don't know I know, I said. Sienna thinks she scared me off with the ultrasound. Brent thinks I am cowering in a hotel. Raymond thinks he just needs to get back into the house to find the safe. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the frozen streets of St. Paul. Set up a mediation, I told Marina. Call their bluff. Tell them I am ready to settle. Tell them I am willing to drop the charges and discuss transferring the title to the trust, provided they pay for the window repairs. You want to offer them the house? Marina asked, shocked. I want to offer them the illusion of the house, I said. I want them all in one room. I want Raymond, Lydia, Brent, and Sienna. I want them to bring the deed. I want them to think they have broken me. And then, I said, turning back to face them. I want Detective McCarthy and a squad of officers waiting in the next room. I want to record them admitting to the fraud before we snap the trap. I picked up the evidence box containing Brent's debt ledger. They brought a sledgehammer to my house, I said softly. I am going to bring the law. It is risky, Thorne warned. If they realize it is a setup, they could get violent. They are already violent, I said. But they are greedy, and greed makes people stupid. Set the meeting for tomorrow at noon. Use the co-working space downtown. Glass walls, neutral ground. I looked at the fake ultrasound one last time before deleting it from my phone. Bring the handcuffs, Marina, I said. Bring 4 pairs. The conference room on the 12th floor of the co-working space in downtown St. Paul was a glass box suspended over the city. It was sterile, smelling of dry erase markers and recycled air. Outside, the gray sky pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, mirroring the bleakness of the winter landscape. I had arrived 45 minutes early to ensure the stage was set exactly to my specifications. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table. To my right was Marina, my attorney, whose expression was as sharp and unyielding as the crease in her blazer. To my left, concealed behind a frosted glass partition that separated the conference room from the breakout area, was Detective McCarthy and 3 uniformed officers. They were silent, waiting for the signal. I had told my family that this was a mediation. I had told them I was ready to discuss terms regarding the house and the damages. I had baited the hook with the one thing they could not resist the prospect of an easy victory. At 12:10, 10 minutes late, the elevator doors slid open. They walked in like a conquering army. Raymond led the way, his heavy coat unbuttoned, walking with the swagger of a man who believed he had bullied his daughter into submission. Lydia followed, clutching a folder of papers to her chest, her face composed into a mask of weary martyrdom. Brent was next, wearing a smirk that he didn't bother to hide. And then there was Sienna. She walked slowly, one hand resting on the small of her back, the other cradling the swell of her stomach under a tight maternity sweater. She paused at the doorway, exhaling a loud, pained breath, playing the role of the fragile vessel to perfection. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. provided the judges did not have access to security footage from a shipping center. "Well," Raymond said, dropping his coat onto an empty chair without asking, "I am glad you finally came to your senses. Everly, this whole charade has been embarrassing for everyone." He sat down at the opposite end of the table. Establishing himself as the counterpower, Lydia and Brent filled in the sides. Sienna lowered herself into a chair with a dramatic wince. "Can we get some water?" Sienna asked, her voice thin. "The baby is kicking up a storm today." I stared at her. I did not blink. "The water cooler is in the hall. Help yourself." Sienna's eyes narrowed, but she didn't move. "Let us not start with the hostility," Lydia chided, placing her folder on the table. "We are here to heal. We are here to fix this mess you made. Everly, we have drawn up an agreement. If you drop the charges and sign the transfer for the trust, we are willing to overlook the trauma you caused Sienna." "Trauma," I repeated. The word felt heavy in my mouth. "The whole community is on our side." "Evie," Brent chimed in, leaning back and crossing his arms. "I checked the fundraiser this morning. We are up to nearly $5,000. People know what you did. You are the villain here. You might as well pay up and stop the bleeding." He looked so confident. He thought the court of public opinion was the Supreme Court. He had no idea he was sitting in a court of law. "I am not here to sign your agreement," I said quietly. "Then why are we here?" Raymond snapped, his patience instantly fraying. "I do not have time for games. I have contractors lined up to fix that wall you let get smashed." "We are here," I said, reaching down to the floor, "to review the accounting." I lifted a heavy stack of file folders and dropped them onto the table. The sound was a dull, authoritative thud that echoed in the glass room. I opened the first folder. "Exhibit A," I said, sliding a paper across the polished wood toward Raymond. "A home equity line of credit application, dated November 17th, amount $65,000. Raymond didn't look at the paper. He looked at me, his eyes hard. "So we needed capital for the renovation. You were out of town. I handled it." "You forged my signature," I said, "and you witnessed it as a notary. That is fraud in the first degree." "It was a verbal proxy," Raymond shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I am your father. I have implied consent." "There is no such thing as implied consent for a bank loan," Marina said, her voice cutting through his volume like a razor, "especially when the funds are not used for the property." I slid the next sheet. The transaction log: $20,000 to an offshore gambling site, $15,000 to a debt consolidator in New Jersey, $8,000 to a shell company called Hayes Consulting. I looked at Sienna. "That is your company, isn't it, Sienna?" "You opened the bank account with your social security number." Sienna shifted in her seat. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, but her eyes darted to the door. I don't know what you're talking about. That was for design fees. For the nursery." "Design fees?" I asked. "For a room that was being demolished with a sledgehammer." "It is a misunderstanding," Lydia interjected, her voice rising in pitch. "Everly, stop this. You are trying to twist things. We use the money to help the family." "Isn't that what money is for?" "I am not done," I said. I pulled out the quitclaim deed. Exhibit B, a transfer of 49% ownership to the Hartley Family Living Trust, notarized by Riverbend Mobile Notary. I looked at Sienna again. "You have a very distinctive walk. Sienna, especially when you are not pretending to be pregnant. The security cameras at the mailroom caught you dropping this off. You were wearing a hoodie. You were not waddling." Sienna's face went pale. Brent looked at her, then back at me, confusion clouding his arrogance. "And finally," I said, "Exhibit C." I picked up a remote control and pointed it at the large monitor on the wall. "You said you came to build a nursery. You told the police it was a surprise renovation. You told the internet I was a monster for stopping you." I pressed play. The video from Mrs. Higgins' doorbell camera filled the screen. The audio was crisp. "The safe is behind the second stud from the left. We get the cash, we pay off your bookie, and we leverage the house for the rest." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. On the screen, Raymond and Brent were conspiring to commit burglary. In the room, the real Raymond and Brent were frozen, their faces draining of color. The arrogance was gone. The misunderstanding defense was dead. I paused the video on the frame where Raymond was laughing about me being stupid. "I found the box. Brent," I said softly. Brent flinched as if I had slapped him. "I found the ledger," I continued. "I know about Vinny. I know about the laundering scheme you were running for the gaming board. I know you didn't want a nursery. You wanted to destroy the wall to hide your own crimes. Brent looked at Raymond. Dad, you said she wouldn't look. You said she was just a risk analyst, not a cop. Shut up, Raymond hissed, veins bulging in his neck. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a pure, distilled hatred. You ungrateful little witch. I gave you life. I put a roof over your head for 18 years. And this is how you repay me by spying on us, by hoarding your money while your brother drowns. He is drowning because you threw him in the ocean, I said. And you tried to use me as the life raft. Lydia burst into tears. It was a jarring, sudden sound. How can you do this? We are your family. You are going to send your father to jail over money over a house. Not over a house, I said. Over the truth. Lydia's sobbing stopped instantly. She slammed her hand on the table, her face twisting into a snarl that matched Raymond's. You selfish, cold-hearted bitch, you never loved us. You always thought you were better than us because you went to college and got a fancy job. You owe us everything. The mask had fallen. There was no more concerned mother. There was only the entitlement of a parasite being ripped away from its host. I owe you nothing, I said. I looked at Marina. I nodded. Marina pressed a button on her phone. The frosted glass partition slid open. Detective McCarthy stepped into the room. Behind him, 3 uniformed officers filed in, their hands resting on their belts. The sound of their boots on the laminate floor was heavy and final. Raymond Hartley, McCarthy said, his voice filling the room. Please stand up and place your hands behind your back. Raymond looked at the officers, then at me. For a second, I thought he might lunge across the table. I saw the violence in his eyes, but then he saw the gun on McCarthy's hip. He slumped. The patriarch crumbled into a defeated old man. He stood up. The handcuffs clicked. Ch-chink. Brent Hartley, McCarthy said, you are under arrest for burglary, wire fraud, and violation of a protective order. Brent didn't move. He was staring at the table, at the photo of his ledger. An officer walked over, hauled him up by his arm, and spun him around. Brent didn't fight. He was crying again. Soft, pathetic whimpers. Lydia Hartley, McCarthy continued, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and aiding and abetting. No, Lydia shrieked, scrambling back in her chair. I didn't sign anything, I just wanted to help my boys. You can't take me. I have high blood pressure. Stand up, ma'am, the officer said, pulling her up. Sienna was the only one left sitting. She was staring at the door, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. She was calculating. She was looking for an angle. Mrs. Cole, McCarthy said, turning to her. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding identity theft and forgery. Sienna moved. It was a desperate, illogical impulse. She shoved her chair back, hard, sending it crashing into the glass wall. She bolted for the door, sprinting past the officer who was cuffing Lydia. Stop her, I yelled. But she didn't get far. An officer posted by the elevator grabbed her arm. Let go of me, Sienna screamed, twisting violently. I am pregnant. You are hurting the baby. I will sue you. She thrashed, trying to pull away, throwing her entire body weight against the officer's grip. And then, it happened. In her struggle. The elastic band of her maternity pants gave way. The friction of her twisting body against the officer's arm dislodged the structure underneath her sweater. The baby slipped. It didn't fall to the floor. It slid down, sideways, coming to rest around her hip. It was a high-density foam form, the kind used by actresses or in medical training. The shape of it pressed absurdly against the fabric of her leggings, creating a grotesque, lumpy bulge on her thigh. The room went silent again. Even Lydia stopped screaming. Sienna froze. She looked down at her side, where her pregnancy had migrated to her leg. She looked up, and for the first time, I saw genuine shame in her eyes, not because she had lied, but because the lie had been stripped naked. That, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, is the only thing about this family that wasn't real from the start. The officer looked at the foam pad, then at Sienna. He didn't say a word. He just turned her around and clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. I want a lawyer, Sienna whispered, defeated. You are going to need a good one, Everly said. I hear they charge extra for acting lessons. I watched them being led out. Raymond, head bowed, muttering curses, Lydia, wailing about her reputation, Brent, sobbing, and Sienna, walking awkwardly with the foam pad still bunched against her hip, the illusion shattered forever. I stood alone in the glass room with Marina and Detective McCarthy, The files were still on the table. The video was still paused on the screen. "That went well?" Marina said, closing her folder. "It went exactly as predicted," I said. I felt a tremor in my hand, the adrenaline finally crashing, but I clenched my fist until it stopped. "Are you okay?" McCarthy asked, looking at me with a mix of professional concern and respect. I looked at the empty chairs where my family had sat. I looked at the view of the city, cold and gray but enduring. "I am fine, Detective," I said. "I just need to go home. I have a wall to fix." I walked out of the conference room. I did not look back at the elevator. I walked out into the cold air of St. Paul. And for the first time in my life, the silence in my head wasn't loneliness, it was peace. The aftermath of the arrests was not a quiet fade to black. It was a chaotic, noisy explosion that spilled out from the glass-walled conference room and onto the front pages of the local St. Paul newspapers. For the first 24 hours, the narrative was murky. The initial police blotter simply listed 4 arrests at a downtown office building. But then, the mugshots were released. There was Raymond, looking furious and disheveled. There was Lydia. Mascara streaked down her face, looking like a stunned socialite. There was Brent, eyes red and puffy, and there was Sienna, looking small and terrifyingly ordinary without her silicone prop. The headline shifted overnight. What had started as "Daughter Calls Cops on Housewarming Party" mutated into "Local Family Indicted in Elaborate Real Estate Fraud Ring." My family did not go down quietly. They hired a lawyer, a man named Arthur Penhaligon, who was known for loud suits and louder press conferences. He was cheap, aggressive, and specialized in muddying the waters. Penhaligon's strategy was immediate and dirty. He went on the morning news and painted a picture of me that was unrecognizable. "Everly Hayes is a vindictive, estranged daughter," Penhaligon told the cameras, standing on the steps of the courthouse. This was a verbal contract between family members. Ms. Hayes agreed to the renovation. She agreed to the loan. She is only pressing charges now because she had a personal falling out with her brother and wants to humiliate them. This is a civil dispute, not a crime. It was a classic gaslighting technique, elevated to a legal defense strategy. They were trying to make the jury and the public doubt my memory. They wanted to make it a case of he said, she said, but I was an analyst. I did not deal in he said, I dealt in timestamps. I sat in Marina's office, watching the news clip on her wall-mounted TV. "They are trying to drag this into the mud," Marina said, tapping a pen against her desk. "They want a jury to think it is just a messy family drama. If the jury thinks it is emotional, they might acquit on the fraud charges." "Then we don't use emotion," I said, opening my laptop. "We use physics." I pulled up the timeline I had built. "Penhaligon says I verbally agreed to the loan on November 17th, I said. On November 17th, at the exact time the loan was signed, I was scanned into a breakout session on cyber liability at the conference in Seattle. I have the RFID log from the conference badge. I pulled up another file. He says I agreed to the renovation. I have emails from October where I explicitly told a contractor I was putting all work on hold until spring. And I have the video from Mrs. Higgins' doorbell where Raymond admits to smashing the wall to find a safe, not to build a nursery. We bury them in paper, Marina agreed. We did not just stick to the criminal defense. Marina filed a massive civil suit the next morning. We were not just asking for the return of the stolen funds. We were suing for damages. The list was exhaustive. Restoration of the historic conservatory, $45,000. Replacement of the vintage glass, $12,000. Temporary housing and security costs, $8,000. Legal fees, $15,000 and counting. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, $100,000. The civil suit hit them harder than the handcuffs. The criminal case was abstract. It was about jail time, which they thought they could talk their way out of. But the civil suit was about money. And for the Hartleys, money was the only blood that mattered. The pressure cracked the first seal in their defense 3 days later. I received a call from the fraud investigator at Midwest Heritage Bank. "Ms. Hayes," the investigator said, his voice grave. "We have completed our internal audit regarding the HELOC origination. We found a discrepancy in the approval chain." "What kind of discrepancy?" I asked. "The loan officer who bypassed the physical ID check. His name is Gary Olson." I knew that name. Gary Olson was a deacon at my father's church. He was the man who organized the summer barbecue. He was my father's golf partner. "Raymond called in a favor," I said. "It appears so," the investigator confirmed. "Mr. Olson manually overrode the system flags. He claimed he had visually verified your identity in his office, but security footage shows you were never in the building. Mr. Olson has been terminated as of this morning, and we are forwarding his file to the district attorney. This was the nail in the coffin for the misunderstanding theory. This proved conspiracy. It proved that Raymond hadn't just made a mistake. He had recruited an insider to help him rob me. Meanwhile, the court of public opinion was turning. Lydia, out on bail and desperate to regain control of the narrative, tried one last Hail Mary. She posted a video to Facebook. She was sitting in her kitchen, wearing a bathrobe, looking frail. "They took my baby girl," she wept into the camera, referring to Sienna. "They arrested a pregnant woman. My daughter Everly has lost her mind. She is letting lawyers whisper poison in her ear. We just wanted to help her. Please, if you have a heart, donate to our defense fund." She posted the link, but this time, the money didn't flow. The comment section, once a reservoir of sympathy, had turned into a shark tank. The mugshots had circulated. The police report details about the foam pad pregnancy had leaked to a local crime blog. "Lydia, isn't it true your daughter-in-law was wearing a costume?" one user asked. "Where did the $65,000 go?" Lydia asked another. "Stop lying. We saw the arrest records. You guys are grifters." Lydia deleted the post 2 hours later, but the screenshots lived on. The community had realized they weren't watching a tragedy. They were watching a scam. The pressure was mounting. A reporter from the Star Tribune camped out on my front lawn. He caught me as I was leaving to meet with the structural engineer. "Ms. Hayes," he shouted, thrusting a microphone over my gate. "Your father says you are destroying the family over a petty dispute. Do you have a comment? Are you suing your own parents?" I stopped. I looked at the reporter. I looked at the camera lens. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I channeled every ounce of the cold, hard winter wind into my voice. "I am not suing my family," I said. "I am suing criminals." I got in my car and drove away. That quote ran on the 6 o'clock news. It was the headline the next morning. The stress was too much for Brent. My brother had never been good at handling consequences. He operated on impulse, and with the walls closing in, with his gambling debts exposed and his safe fantasy shattered, he snapped. On Thursday night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think you are so smart? You think you won? Watch your back. Accidents happen to pretty houses." I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I forwarded it to Detective McCarthy. "Trace it," I said. It took them 40 minutes. The burner phone had been purchased at a gas station 3 blocks from Brent's apartment. The GPS pinged from inside his living room. He had violated the temporary restraining order. He had violated his bail conditions. By Friday morning, Brent was back in handcuffs. The judge was not amused. "Mr. Hartley," the judge said, looking down from the bench with disdain, "you were granted bail on the condition of no contact. You responded by sending a death threat. Bail is revoked. You will remain in custody until trial." As bailiffs dragged Brent away, kicking and screaming about how it wasn't fair, I saw the look on Raymond's face. It wasn't concern for his son, it was fear. He realized that the weak link had just snapped, and then came the shatter. Saturday morning, Marina called me. "Get to the district attorney's office, now." "What happened?" "Sienna," Marina said. "She wants to cut a deal." I arrived at the DA's office 30 minutes later. I sat behind the two-way mirror, looking into the interrogation room. Sienna sat at the metal table. She looked different. The fake sweetness was gone. The confused wife act was gone. She looked sharp, cold, and predatory. She was facing identity theft charges that carried a mandatory minimum. She wasn't going to go to prison for a family she married into. "I want immunity on the wire fraud," Sienna told the assistant district attorney, "and I want a reduced sentence on the forgery. You give us the whole map," the ADA said, "and we will talk." Sienna didn't hesitate. She threw them under the bus with the efficiency of a butcher. "It was Raymond's idea," she said, her voice steady. "He came up with it in October. He said Everly had too much equity and no husband to protect it. He said she was wasting the family wealth on a house that was too big for her." I watched through the glass, my stomach twisting. "He told Brent there was a safe," Sienna continued. "But he told me the truth. He said even if there wasn't a safe, if we smashed the walls, the insurance money would come to the house, and since he planned to transfer the deed to the trust, he would control the payout." "And the pregnancy?" the ADA asked. Sienna shrugged. "That was Lydia's touch. She said Everly was weak. She said Everly would never kick out a baby. It was an insurance policy against eviction. I wore the pad. I did the photo shoots. Lydia edited the ultrasound. And the money. Brent gambled half of it, Sienna said with a sneer. Raymond took $10,000 for consulting fees to pay off his own credit cards. I got $5,000 for playing the part. That's it. I didn't even get a nursery. She leaned forward. Raymond is the architect. He forged the witness signature. He set up the meeting with Gary at the bank. He drove me to the notary. He ran the whole thing. I closed my eyes. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. It was a cold, mathematical calculation. My father had looked at my life, my success, my home, and he hadn't felt pride. He had felt envy. He had seen me as a resource to be harvested. Sienna signed her statement. She was given a plea deal, 2 years probation and restitution in exchange for testifying against Raymond and Lydia. The house of cards collapsed. By Monday, the family was devouring itself. Arthur Penhaligon, their lawyer, quit. He filed a motion to withdraw as counsel, citing irreconcilable conflicts of interest between the defendants. Translation: they were blaming each other so viciously that he couldn't represent them all. Raymond was blaming Brent for being a junkie. Lydia was blaming Sienna for being a rat. Brent, from his jail cell, was blaming everyone for not bailing him out again. I sat in my living room, watching the snow fall outside the newly boarded-up conservatory window. I had hired a security guard to stand watch at the gate, but it felt unnecessary now. They were too busy fighting each other to fight me. I opened my laptop and looked at the Brent ledger. I looked at the evidence folder. I had spent my whole life trying to build a family out of people who only wanted to tear me down. I had tried to buy their love with loans, with silence, with compliance. But as I watched the news reports of their implosion, I realized the truth. I hadn't destroyed the Hartley family. The Hartley family had been dead for a long time. It was a corpse propped up by my money and my guilt. All I had done was stop paying for the funeral. My phone buzzed. It was Marina. Raymond is trying to negotiate, she said. He is offering to sign the deed back over to you fully if you drop the civil suit. No, I said instantly. Everly, it would end this. You would have the house clear. I don't just want the house, Marina, I said, looking at the dust that still coated my floorboards. They stole my peace. They stole my security. They tried to steal my name. I took a deep breath. Tell them I will see them in court, and tell Raymond to save his negotiating skills for the prison commissary. I hung up. The silence in the house was deep and absolute. But for the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt clean. I was ready for the endgame. I was ready to watch the gavel drop. The courtroom in the Ramsey County District Court was a cavern of polished oak and austere silence. It smelled of floor wax and the heavy, dusty scent of old paper. I sat at the prosecution table, not as a plaintiff, but as the primary witness for the state of Minnesota. To my right sat the assistant district attorney, a sharp woman named Harper, who had taken the case map I built and turned it into a weapon of mass destruction. Across the aisle sat the remnants of the Hartley family. They looked smaller here, without the backdrop of my home to destroy, without the echo chamber of their own lies. They looked like what they were: desperate, petty criminals. Raymond wore a suit that was too large for him, likely bought hurriedly for the trial. Lydia was dressed in a muted gray cardigan, clutching a tissue she had not yet used. Brent, in the orange jumpsuit of the county jail having had his bail revoked, looked hollowed out. Sienna sat separately, behind the defense table, next to her public defender. She was the only one not looking at me. The Honorable Judge Holloway entered. The bailiff called the room to order. The gavel did not bang. It tapped, a dry final sound that signaled the end of the noise. The charges were read. It was a laundry list of felonies that made the air in the room feel heavy. Identity theft, mortgage fraud, wire fraud, burglary in the second degree, conspiracy to commit theft by swindle. The trial moved with the swift, brutal efficiency of a guillotine. The prosecution did not rely on emotion. We did not talk about broken hearts or ruined childhoods. We talked about math. Harper called the first witness the forensic auditor from the bank. Mr. Davies? Harper asked, projecting a document onto the large screen that dominated the courtroom. Can you identify this document? It is a home equity line of credit application for the property at 404 Summit Avenue, the auditor stated, dated November 17th, and the signature, it purports to be that of Everly Hayes. However, digital forensic analysis confirms the IP address used to submit the preliminary paperwork matches a computer located at the residence of Raymond Hartley. Furthermore, The physical signing, which was supposedly witnessed by the loan officer, occurred while Ms. Hayes was documented to be in Seattle, Washington. The screen changed. It showed my flight logs. My hotel receipt, the time-stamped selfie I had taken with a keynote speaker at the risk management conference. $65,000, Harper said, letting the number hang in the air. Stolen in 11 days. Where did it go? The flowchart appeared, the offshore gambling sites, the shell company, E. Hayes Consulting, Raymond's defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer who looked exhausted, tried to cross-examine. Is it not possible, Mr. Davies, that Mr. Hartley was acting as a proxy for his daughter, managing her affairs while she was away? There is no legal proxy for forgery, the auditor replied dryly, and usually, property managers do not funnel $20,000 to a sportsbook in Nevis. Next came the video. The courtroom lights dimmed. The footage from Mrs. Higgins' doorbell camera played. It was the same grainy night vision I had watched in my kitchen, but seeing it here, on a 10-foot screen in a court of law, stripped it of any lingering family intimacy. Smash the glass first. We get the cash, we pay off your bookie, and we leverage the house for the rest. I watched the jury. 12 strangers from St. Paul. I saw their faces harden. I saw a woman in the back row shake her head. They were not seeing a father helping a son. They were seeing a demolition crew. When it was time for the defense, Raymond insisted on taking the stand. His lawyer tried to stop him, but Raymond Hartley had spent 60 years believing he was the smartest man in every room. He straightened his tie and sat in the witness box, glaring at Harper. I built that family, Raymond declared, his voice booming with the false authority of the pulpit. I was trying to save my son. Brent was in trouble, serious trouble. As a father, you do what you have to do. Everly has plenty. She lives in that big, empty house all alone. She wouldn't even notice the money. I was just reallocating resources to save a life. Harper stood up. She walked slowly toward him. Reallocating resources, she repeated. Is that what you call forging your daughter's signature? I was going to pay it back, Raymond snapped. Once the nursery was done, once the trust was settled. Ah, the trust, Harper said. She picked up the quitclaim deed. You transferred 49% of her home to a trust you controlled. Why 49%? Mr. Hartley. Raymond hesitated. He knew the trap. Because, Harper answered for him. 50% would trigger a reassessment. 49% is just enough to file a partition action. You weren't going to pay her back. You were going to force a sale. You were going to sell her home out from under her to pay for your son's gambling addiction. It is family property, Raymond shouted. It all belongs to the family. No, Mr. Hartley, Harper said, her voice like ice. It belongs to Everly Hayes, and you are just a thief with a sledgehammer. Raymond turned red. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to intervene, to stop the humiliation. I just looked back, my face a mask of absolute calm. I was the risk analyst now, and he was a liability I had written off. When Brent took the stand, he tried a different tactic. He cried. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. He sobbed into the microphone. I have a problem. I am sick. My sister knows that. She always helped me before. I thought she would understand. Mr. Hartley, the judge interrupted, looking over his spectacles. You are 32 years old. You are not a child. You broke into a home. You destroyed property. You laundered money. Addiction is a tragedy, but it is not a license to loot your sister's life. Lydia didn't take the stand, but her lawyer tried to paint her as a bystander. She is just a mother, the lawyer argued. She wanted to keep the peace. Judge Holloway looked at the evidence file, the text messages, the Facebook posts, the fake fundraiser. She wasn't keeping the peace, the judge said. She was the propaganda minister. She facilitated the fraud by creating a social shield. She weaponized public sympathy against the victim. And then, the final nail. Sienna. She walked to the stand in her orange jumpsuit. There was no foam pad today. Her stomach was flat. She swore to tell the truth, and for the first time in 5 weeks, she actually did. Who came up with the pregnancy idea? Harper asked. Lydia did, Sienna said, her voice quiet but clear. She said Everly had a savior complex. She said if I looked pregnant, Everly wouldn't call the cops, and if she did, the cops wouldn't arrest a pregnant woman. And the quitclaim deed. Raymond drove me to the notary. He gave me Everly's old driver's license, the one she thought she lost last Christmas. I put on a wig. I signed her name. Why did you do it, Sienna? Sienna looked at Brent. Then she looked at me. Because I thought they were rich. I thought if I helped them, I would get a cut. I didn't know they were broke. I didn't know the only money they had was what they could steal from her. The confession hung in the air. The Hartley family myth, the loving parents, the struggling son. The supportive clan was dead. It had been dissected on the floor of the courtroom, exposing the rot in every organ. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up. We find the defendant, Raymond Hartley, guilty on all counts. We find the defendant, Brent Hartley, guilty on all counts. We find the defendant, Lydia Hartley, guilty of conspiracy and aiding and abetting. The sentencing hearing followed immediately. Judge Holloway did not believe in delays. Raymond Hartley, the judge said, you preyed on your own child. You abused the banking system. You committed perjury. I sentence you to serve 60 months in a state correctional facility, followed by 10 years of probation. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $65,000 to Midwest Heritage Bank. Raymond slumped. 5 years. He would be an old man when he got out. Brent Hartley, the judge continued, 3 years, and mandatory treatment for gambling addiction. Lydia Hartley, 2 years of house arrest, and you are banned from all social media platforms for the duration of your sentence. Sienna Cole, time served, plus 3 years probation. Then, the judge turned to the civil matters. The quitclaim deed recorded on November 19th is hereby declared void ab initio. It is a fraudulent instrument. The title to 404 Summit Avenue is restored fully and exclusively to Everly Hayes. The home equity line of credit is declared fraudulent. The debt is the responsibility of the perpetrator, not the victim. He banged the gavel. Crack. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Louder than the glass breaking. Louder than the screaming. It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on my past. The bailiffs moved in. They handcuffed Raymond and Brent as they were being led out. Raymond passed by the prosecution table. He stopped. He looked at me with eyes that were no longer angry, just cold and dead. You will regret this, he rasped. You will be alone, Everly. You will have your big house, and you will have silence, and you will rot in it. I looked at him. I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. No, Raymond, I said. I won't regret it, and I won't be alone. I pointed to the door. I will be free, and silence isn't rot. Silence is peace. I just finished what you started. The bailiff shoved him forward. The doors swung shut. I walked out of the courtroom. Marina was smiling, packing up her briefcase. Harper shook my hand. I walked down the long marble corridor, my heels clicking on the floor. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse and stepped out onto the steps. It was late afternoon. The Minnesota winter was still biting. The air crisp and sharp enough to freeze the breath in your lungs. The sky was a brilliant, hard blue. I took a deep breath. It hurt. But it was a good hurt. It was the feeling of oxygen reaching parts of my body that had been suffocated for 37 years. I pulled out my phone. I had one call to make. I dialed the number of the contractor Caleb had recommended, the specialist in historic glass. Hello, this is Everly Hayes, I said. I am ready to move forward. Yes, the full restoration? I paused, looking at the city skyline. And I want to make a change to the plans. The glass, make it triple pane, reinforced. I want it to be unbreakable. I hung up. I walked down the steps to my car. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't check my blocked messages folder. I didn't wonder how Lydia would handle house arrest or how Brent would survive prison. Those were risk factors I had eliminated. I got into my car and drove home, to my home, and as I turned onto Summit Avenue, seeing the Victorian roofline against the sunset, I knew that the real renovation hadn't been on the house. It had been on me. I had torn down the load-bearing walls of guilt and obligation, and I was still standing. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long road from that first shattered window to the final gavel drop, but I walked it one step at a time. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, while cooking dinner, or maybe while working on your own dream home? Please drop a comment below and let me know. And if you enjoyed watching Justice Be Served, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this victory with even more people.